Hello, and welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast, brought to you by the Malfers Group team, where each week we tackle important, actionable topics to help churches thrive. And now, here's your hosts, Scott Ball and AJ Matthew.
Hey everyone, welcome to episode 71 of the Church Revitalization Podcast. My name is AJ and that's Scott over there, and we're happy to be with you again this week. And we're talking about the 10 church consulting essentials that you need to consider before hiring a consultant. And Scott, this is an article that we've had out on our website, a tool for many years, and is super popular.
Yeah, it's one of our most popular articles on our website. In fact, if you Googled the words church consulting, odds are this article will pop up maybe in the first two things on Google there. So it's a popular article, and we've never talked about it, mainly because we don't want to be like sounding self-serving, and so we don't necessarily want to draw a lot of attention to it to try to point ourselves out and go, look at us, we're so great. But the reality is that the Malfers Group has been in the church consulting space long before AJ and I were working with the Malfers Group. So our team and our organization has been in this world for a couple of decades, and we know the space. And so it's why this article was originally written, and it's why we thought, you know what, why not talk about it? We know a lot of churches are thinking about this right now, especially with the pandemic.
Yeah,
we're on the backside of this pandemic. I really believe that. And so churches are thinking about the future, and churches are hiring folks to work with them. And so we hope that this is a good resource for you, whether you end up working with us or with someone else.
sure.
These are 10 things to consider as you're evaluating a good partner. So
Yeah.
trying to approach this as unbiased as possible, but obviously we do this work as well. So take that as you will, right?
There you go. Hey, and also just a little teaser here at the end of the podcast. We are going to be announcing this week. This is the first week of January 2021. If you're not listening to this when we're actually producing it, but we had put out a giveaway for a free church ministry analysis. And at the end of today's podcast, we're going to announce who that winner is, and we'll be excited to be working with their church. All right, let's move on to the 10 church consulting essentials that you should be considering. And these are not in a particular order. This is just 10. So we're not working our way from, most important to least or vice versa. But the first one that we have on our list is having a balanced approach. And so when considering someone to work for your church, and truly, I just phrased it that way on accident, but it's something to consider working for your church. The results need to be beneficial to your church. That's the point of doing this in the first place, and probably would be a long decision process. That's typically the case, because it is a big deal for most churches to decide to work with somebody. So you need a consulting organization that has a balanced approach to what they do, and not simply putting you into a box and having a rationale for the components that are going to be worked through, right, Scott?
Yeah, church consulting groups tend to operate on two extremes. One is systems and strategies extreme, and the other is sort of high level vision, mission extreme.
Yeah.
And if you get all the vision, mission stuff, but that doesn't translate down into sort of actionable strategies, then it's a complete waste of time, and you got some good words to use, but you didn't get anything tangible to walk away with. On the other end of the spectrum, if you do the systems and strategies and all that really practical stuff, but you'd never dealt with those foundational core issues of vision, of mission, then it tends to fizzle out just as soon as you run out of whatever their playbook is that they gave you.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing that's sustaining. It's not rooted in anything. And so you really want to be sure that you're working with a partner that has a balanced approach that ties together. How does mission relate to core values, relate to your discipleship pathway, relate to vision, relate to strategy? That's why we use a tool called the Ministry X Matrix, which shows the alignment from one piece of the puzzle to the next, so that you can not only make good decisions in the middle of this process, but be able to make good decisions that are aligned with one another long term moving forward. So
Yeah.
be sure that you're working with someone who keeps both things in mind, both those foundational issues and the practical ones.
Yeah, and we see this pretty frequently, churches that have been through some other type of process, either recently or in the past, and it might keep them going for a little while because there's probably always something new to work on, but
Mhm.
then it ends up not being sustainable. I would venture to say maybe 30% of the time we work with churches, they've done something either recently or in the last few years, and it
Mhm.
left them kind of like, well, I guess we just need to do something else or something again.
Yeah,
And so, so it's a really important point there, having that balanced approach to merging mission vision on more of the high level side with strategy and implementation on the practical side.
that's it. Yeah.
All right, our second one is being denominationally flexible. And
Mm.
so there certainly are niche organizations that work within denominations. And of course, denominations themselves many times have internal systems in place or people or opportunities that can help churches within their spectrum.
Mhm.
And then even when you get out into the Baptist world, of course, the Southern Baptist Convention has things, but then individual Baptist associations, and this is true of other denominations as well, that are more associationally based, might have tools or opportunities within them, and that's great. And usually those come at a low cost. There's sometimes a trade-off for the low cost. Is they frequently lack manpower to help a lot of churches in a year, and a lot of times don't have necessarily experience and systems in place to really be able to get a church over the goal line and into sustainability. Um, but then there's outside organizations also that work across different denominations. And so that's important. It might be more important to you to work with an organization maybe that is just focused on your denomination. There's nothing wrong with that. That's okay. For us, we work across most denominations. We take more of a theological approach than a denominational approach. We're a conservative evangelical organization. And those are the types of churches that we align with, which includes most of the evangelical world in the United States and around the world. But,
Yeah.
that's,
There are even conservative uh, evangelically minded churches in mainline denominations as well.
yeah,
There's pockets of that. So we're not tied. We get this question a lot.
yeah,
Do you only work with? I actually just answered this question a couple days ago, and I think on New Year's Eve I had a conversation with the pastor. He said, "Y'all just work with Baptist churches?" And I said, "Well, no. I don't even know that we work predominantly with Baptist churches. Certainly we work with them,
yeah.
but not nowhere near exclusively." So
Yeah,
I
it
think
is
it's
pretty broad.
helpful. Yeah, I think it's helpful for your consulting partner to have a theological perspective and not a denominational one. The reason why I think that that's important, AJ, is that when you have a group that's tied to the denomination, oftentimes their goals for the consulting process are denominational. So here's what I
Greater
mean.
denominational alignment, maybe. Yeah.
Not even just that, but they might be going, well, you know what? This church may not work out. So long as I can save the denomination, it doesn't really matter if I can save this church.
Mhm.
Because they're looking at it from that macro level. You really want a partner that cares about you, your church, wants your church to succeed. Certainly we hope denominations are successful and healthy, but we care about your church. We want your church. And so be sure you're working with someone whose interests align with those of your church, not necessarily the larger organization that you may or may not be a part of.
Yeah. And we've certainly seen this in churches that had opportunities for more of a denominational opportunity, but chose not to, usually because of those reasons.
That's right. Yeah,
And so, yeah, with a theological point of view, the only thing we care about is building healthy churches that
that's it.
are focused on making them maturing disciples of Jesus. And so,
Yep.
we're not going to get hung up. The other thing, denominations come with a lot of tradition, and that's a fault in a lot of churches who have found themselves plateaued or declining, is because tradition has become a stumbling block, and they're not able to move past that.
Yeah.
I mean, traditions have their place, and there's good and there's bad. But when they become a barrier to your church moving forward and continuing to be relevant in the next generation and continue to thrive, then you need to have a perspective that can move you past that. So,
And we're far from the only organization that's denominationally flexible like
oh,
that.
sure.
Just to be clear, but I think I personally, and again, I'm biased on this, but I think that that's important because again, usually if a organization isn't tied to a denomination, their goals are usually more about helping individual churches than they are about helping the broader organization to survive. So
I'd have to agree. Yeah. That was number 2. Number 3 is assessment. So you can't effectively chart a new course forward without figuring out where you're starting from, and so that's important. We use a tool called the Church Ministry Analysis, and which is also a really low cost and effective way for your church to get started working with TMG, but also to come away with a really good idea of where you're going to have some needed areas of improvement. That's a service that is just $99 too. So that's a really easy way and a great way to assess where your church is starting from.
yeah, again, assessment is really good. I think it's also important for the assessment to be rooted in just nuance and the complexities and the intricacies of your own specific church. A lot of times, the church assessments you find will just be stacking your church up against an average. Here's how you compare to the average, or here's how you compare to the best, or whatever. And that comparison is sometimes in and of itself unhealthy.
Yeah.
What we want to see is compare you to the healthiest version of yourself, and drive you in that direction. So I think that that's important. The other thing is sometimes organizations will assess you according to their model. So they have an idea of what your church ought to look like, not in terms of health, but just in terms of model and how you do things. And so they'll go, oh, well, that's not going to work, as if the same way to do church, like there's one right way to do church for all churches everywhere. And that's just not the case. And so you want to be sure that the assessment is rooted in health, that it's rooted in who you are, and comparing you to you, and not just comparing you to some average set of numbers that's an aggregate of churches across the United States.
Yeah, right. Especially, most statistics say somewhere north of 80% of churches in North America are not doing well. And so if we want to make a comparison to how well are you doing compared to most churches not doing well, that's not particularly helpful. You're not just trying to beat the
race to
person
the
down
bottom.
street. Yeah, race to the bottom. Yeah. So yeah, a little bit more objective approach to health in the assessment. The next piece is a biblical foundation. So we sort of talked about this a moment ago in regards to denominationalism, and so a biblical foundation in what you do is absolutely important. And a lot of times churches come to the realization, especially working with us and what our process entails, because we are biblically centered in everything that we do, and sometimes there's a bit of an awakening, like, wow, this is actually not. I don't want to say that it's not hard. It is hard. It's challenging, but it's simple because it's right out of God's word. I mean, the scriptures really give us a great foundation and model for health in the church and being on mission. Mm-hmm. And so, there's hard work that has to be put in, but it's not complicated.
Right. If you're looking at a consulting organization as you're doing your research and you're getting proposals or whatever, if there's not a clear tie back into the Word of God at any point, that should be a red flag for you. And now all truth is God's truth, but we root ourselves in the best truth when we root our process in Scripture itself. So it's one of the things we hear time and again when we're working with churches is people are thankful that not only is the training and the work practical, but it's also rooted in Scripture. I have to give full credit to the founder of our group, Aubrey Malfers, who is a longtime professor at Dallas Seminary, and so he has always had 2 feet. 1 foot sort of in Scripture and in the Word of God, and another foot sort of in the practical realm of Christian leadership, and that's at the heart of what we do. In any organization you look at, again, we're biased in even just saying that this should be a priority for you, but we hope that it would be a priority for you.
Yeah.
That any group you choose to work with would have a good biblical foundation.
Yeah, absolutely. If we were going to probably raise one of these to the most important, I would have to say that would be it.
That'd probably be it, and not at number 4. Yeah.
Yeah. Our 5th one on the list, though, is having a clear process. So there are certainly organizations that are a little more ambiguous, and is maybe a little bit more free flowing. Like, let's kind of get started, figure out where you're at, and then we'll figure out kind of maybe what we need to do next, or how long that might take. And so while we're not a put you in a box organization, we are process driven with a biblical foundation. So we do have things that over the history of our organization, Aubrey's initial research and development, and then continuing on now, as Scott said, through a couple of decades of church health work, we know where the key problem areas are to investigate, and then develop processes and systems around to move past and to be functioning at a healthy level. So, and it's I want to understand.
I want to confession. Can I just have a confession moment?
It wouldn't be the Church Revitalization podcast without a confession from you, Scott.
Confession from Scott. Yeah, I've had moments. I can think of a couple instances where I was talking with the church initially and going, you know what, I think that, step 1 or step 2 of the process, probably you guys have covered. So, we can cut down on some costs or whatever time. We'll just start at step 3, whatever. And inevitably, every single time I've done this, and I've only done it like maybe twice, I end up going, that was a mistake. I need it because I thought that they were good on part 2 or step 2 or whatever. And then you get into it and you're like, you weren't really good at step 2. you weren't, there were problems further back. So just preaching this to myself, we have a clear step-by-step process. And sometimes I think maybe we can skip step 1. No, always follow the process, because you don't know what you don't know. Right. And oftentimes we don't even know until we get on site, and then we see it. We go, those core values that you thought were clear and good, you've got some dysfunctional ones that you don't want to be honest about. So if we skipped that core values process, there's a good chance that we miss something dysfunctional that's going to sabotage, the church when we get to part 4 or whatever. So you want to be sure that you have a process and be sure that you're following the process, because if you don't follow the process, you won't get the results. AJ, you were actually just having a conversation with someone very recently who had a process and didn't follow it, and they were frustrated by their results. And you asked them, you said, well, did you follow the process? And they said, well, no.
Not really. Yeah.
Well,
they thought, we'll do this or that.
We'll skip around. We'll do it.
Yeah. And you don't end up with the same results. So, sometimes we don't need to spend 4 hours talking about something that, we can do a quick review, understand how this fits in with other things. And in an hour and a half or 2 hours, okay. Yeah, we kind of get where we're at with that. Okay, cool. Maybe we saved ourselves a couple hours worth of time. But skipping an entire step and just thinking we're good and let's just move on,
it's a mistake.
Almost always a mistake. Yeah.
Yep.
No doubt about it.
100%.
Our next one on here in our top 10 is number 6 is coaching. Mm-hmm. And this is really important, especially in the implementation phase of any work that you do. So there's a lot of work that goes into developing a plan. And if you don't have that back end coaching to make sure that you're following through and helping you through the inevitable pitfalls that you're going to find along the way, then this is the make or break that would have you on the phone with another organization 2 or 3 years from now going, we did it and it seemed good, but yeah, I don't know, we need help. And that's why we
100%.
put so much emphasis on this, to the point of having an implementation specialist in the organization that is focused solely on helping the churches get through the implementation phase, getting their feet under them in the new way of doing things, implementing changes for a year, because it takes a while to form new habits. And it takes a while for little problems to pop up their heads as well. I mean, you might be a few weeks in before your first thing, but you might be 6 months or 8 months in before you're like, okay, we got to this, this next phase, and now we have this happening. Or over the last couple months, something's been bubbling up. And so having a consultant that is going to continue to be with you into implementation is vitally important.
Yeah, one of the key questions we get all the time, I've mentioned this on the podcast, I'll keep bringing it up. We get asked the question all the time, what's the difference between churches that succeed and the churches that fail in a strategic planning process? And my response is always the same. The churches that keep meeting, keep working. The churches that stop meeting, stop working. And so having a sort of a built-in coaching plan as a part of your consulting process provides even the simplest level of accountability of, did your team meet this month? So that, you just stay on track. Because if I hear from one of my churches that I'm working with, oh, well, no, we haven't met for the last month, the first thing I'm going to ask is, when's your next meeting? Because you've got to keep meeting if you want to see results. But I can promise you, if you keep meeting, you will keep working and you will see progress. You will see results. It's a little bit like working out that way, right, AJ? Like you just have to show up. Now, the harder you work out or whatever, the more results you're going to see. The less you put into it, the less you'll get out of it. So, but if you show up at all, if you exercise once a week, you'll get some sort of result. If you exercise 5 times a week, you'll get a lot more. The same is true with implementing strategic plan. Like the more effort you put into it, the more you'll get out of it. But if you at least keep meeting once a month as a team, you will see a result.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, all those New Year's resolutions people that have already stopped going to the gym, don't be like them.
That's right.
Keep doing the work.
Keep doing the work.
Number 7 is experience. And so Scott just mentioned this a minute ago. I mean, we're founded by Aubrey Malphurs, who just retired from Dallas Seminary last year, 2019. And he was there for 37 years or something like that. I mean, so we're founded in a long history of church experience, ministry experience, biblical basis, and we've been working with churches all over the country and around the world since the 1990s. So I mean, look for that. Just pay attention to your consultant and what their experience level is.
Yeah, it's important. If you do this work long enough, like I think I'm going into in February, AJ, I think it'll be going into my 6th year doing this full time. The longer you do this work, the more things just start to rhyme. Every church is different, so it's not all exactly the same, but you see the same kinds of things. It's a little bit like a doctor, right? Someone comes in sick and they are usually able to just tell right away, like, I know what this is. It's a little bit like that. So you want to be sure that whoever you're working with, they know what's up. I take a lot of pride in the fact that our organization does that. We're always paying attention to what's going on, and as things evolve and change through, all of us, every church consulting organization is new to dealing with consulting with churches through a pandemic.
Yeah.
But pay attention to how they've pivoted. Have they tried to adjust what they're doing, or are they trying to still ramrod, the past into this new future? Mm-hmm. So that experience matters.
Yeah, for sure. And in addition to that, I think a consulting team, you gain the experience of every member of the team as well. So right. I mean, we've never had a church that one of us worked with that we weren't all then aware of.
We were talking about you.
I mean, we're just always talking about, what was that last conversation about? How was that church doing? And we've expanded our team now.
And praying for those churches.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We brought on 5 more consultants in 2020. And, all of those guys have years of church experience as well. So, and, we're continuously monthly doing coaching updates and everything with our team as well. So
Yep.
that's experience is a big deal.
Yep, it is.
All right, the next one. So this probably should have either been, number 10 or number 1, cost, because it always comes down to.
This is the big question that churches ask. Like, what is it? They don't even want to hear what the process is. Just shoot me with the number and what it costs.
I haven't had one of those calls in a long time, but I've certainly had them where they're just like hyper focused on cost. Like, don't waste one more minute of my time. What's the cost for this? And we can talk about it after that. I get it. I'm actually that person. If somebody tries to sell me on something, I'm always like, stop, cost first, then we'll have a conversation. Don't be like me. But
be like you. I mean, it's normal. It's a human, normal human response.
Yeah, I suppose it is. And I mean, it's an unfortunate aspect of ministry as well that it takes.
And newsflash, our information for you is good as of January 2021.
Cost subject to change.
Cost subject to change, but we're going to be pretty upfront with you on what it costs to work with us, because we know that people wonder about that. And if you've listened this deep into the episode, you've earned hearing cost for us. So
yeah. So I mean, generally speaking, I mentioned a minute ago, our church ministry analysis is just $99. We've got online. Our process is called strategic envisioning that we do with churches. We have an online version of that, sort of more self-directed by your church leadership team for under $1,000. You can work with one of our guides directly that actually would come on site with you for under $5,000, and then
which would include travel,
including travel. And then we've got some other options in which maybe multiple visits would be involved or some other services, and you're still under $10,000. So we've tried to have things, that would be able to cover any church's budget. And, how do we compare with other organizations? Well, for the most part, probably on the lower end of the spectrum at this point. You can certainly spend a lot more with some other groups. But again, whatever is going to end up working out for you is what's most important, that your church gets healthy. So.
Yeah, you can just, if you want to just think in your mind, like, what's it going to cost us to work with someone? Like AJ said, we've intentionally, our fees are on the lower end of what you'll see, because we're a nonprofit. So we're not trying to, we don't have shareholders that we're responsible for making money for. And none of us on the team are shareholders or whatever, getting a profit or whatever. So, we have some donor support to help offset some costs, and then our fees, we just keep them as low as we can, because we're not trying to get rich on this. We're just wanting to keep the lights on the organization and our lights on for our guides as well, their livelihood. But easily you can spend $20,000 working with some groups, more than that, and not necessarily getting. I don't know that you're going to get all that value out of it. But you should just know some of the big brand. I don't want to say bigger necessarily, because I don't want to undercut us, but some big names out there, you're going to easily spend over $10,000, $20,000. And I'm not criticizing them in any way, but you should just know that that's what you're hopping into on the cost. And one thing that we don't do, I do want to mention this, AJ, because this comes up from time to time. Churches will ask, do we scale our fees based on church size? And we don't, actually. So if you're a church of, 100 people, the cost is the same as if you were a church of 5,000 people. Should we do that? Should we charge more, charge less? I don't know. I've never been a big fan of that, because I put the same amount of heart and energy into your church if you're a church of 100 people or if you're a church of 2,000 people. And I've worked with churches on both ends of that spectrum. Yeah. I don't care less about one church or the other. So I think that it should be the same. That's just me.
Yeah, we do have some limited opportunities for some scholarships for churches that are in
Mhm.
some pretty tight financial constraints,
Yeah,
and we can work with you more on our online service than we can on site because there's just a lot of fixed costs whenever you've got travel and everything involved.
right.
But we do want to make sure though that cost is not something that prevents you from getting healthy. So
Right.
always, always, always have a conversation with us,
Yeah.
and let's figure out where you're at, what the best approach is going to be for you, and then we'll work on what can be done, if anything, on the cost, depending on donor scholarship availability. And
That's a great point. Yeah. I guess I was trying to say our fees are what they are.
right.
And then if we can subsidize with scholarships or something, we can do that. But we don't have a sliding scale fee
That's
for
right. We don't have a system for choosing the price based on your church. That's not how we
yes.
how we work.
Thank you for
Um,
clarifying that.
and if you are a perhaps potential donor for the Malford Group and care about building up the church around the world, then we would certainly love to have a conversation with you as well, because we can make it really easy for you, for your heart for the church, and your gift and blessing financially to be able to directly and immediately go towards helping a church become better disciple makers. So we want to talk with you.
Yep.
Our next one, we're on number 9, is empowered leadership. And so that is a consulting process in which it involves building up leaders in your church. And that is where we are squarely rooted. Our approach into helping churches get healthy is not a one-on-one, like we're just going to work with your pastor, or we're just going to work with your elders. We involve a group of people. We call it a strategic leadership team that goes through the education process of understanding church health, and then the implementation process of strategizing and working towards church health. And we think that's really important, not only simply for the process of helping your church become healthy, but for the ongoing function of your church as well. You should be equipping leaders to do the work of the ministry and
Yeah.
building them up and having them working in their gifting. And so this gets into a whole other, really philosophy and theology of healthy church, in which we want to see you having a clear understanding of organization in your church, leadership levels, healthy function between them, how people are trained and deployed and encouraged and evaluated. So there's a lot to that, and we are hyper leadership driven.
Yeah. I was just speaking with a denominational association yesterday um, at a pastor's conference, and got asked this question about sort of revitalization teams or strategic leadership team and how should they be put together. And again, as AJ said, I think this is a real asset to the way that we approach it. We have a philosophy of what we think really works, and it really is context dependent a little bit on the size of your church, the size of your staff, what boards you have and don't have. But we know what works in terms of getting that revitalization team, or strategic leadership team is the term we use, helping that team be built. And again, I think it's a real benefit for working with us, or hopefully any organization you work with has a process for helping you build that team, and not just being like, I don't know, pick some people. But we have a way of helping you assemble that team correctly so that you get the best results from the process. It's very important.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, moving on to number 10. This is simply finding a consulting organization that listens well.
Yeah.
And we start this from the very beginning. We're not a process in which you just, do a couple of email exchanges, send us a check, and okay, we'll get started. It all starts with a conversation. We're a relational organization. Zoom is how we typically meet. And so we get face to face with you and
How we meet remotely, not
learn remotely. Yes.
when we come on site. But when we're not on site, usually we're using Zoom. We're not using
Yeah.
the.
Yep. But that's how it all starts. Just with a conversation. There's never a cost for that. We're just going to meet with you on Zoom and get to know you, find out, what's been going on with your ministry. Tell us about your church. Tell us about you as a pastor, or you as an elder, or whomever we're speaking with in the leadership team. And so it just starts there. We build a relationship, we get to know you, and talk about what we do, talk about what you need, and move on from there. And again, you end up working with one of the guides on our team, and so you can form that relationship,
Yeah.
and that's going to be your point of contact then as you keep going through the process. So I think this is an important aspect of choosing a consultant. And a lot of times it does come down to just that warm fuzzy feeling that you're going to get with somebody.
Yeah.
Maybe you're spoken with a few, the price is okay, everybody's kind of within reason of one another, it seems like maybe the process is good, but just who do I think is going to continue to listen to me and take an interest in my church? So I hope you find that with us. That's not the case 100% of the time. You just might find somebody else that you connect with more, and blessings on that relationship for you as well. We hope that is fruitful.
100%. I've had times where I've pointed people other directions and said, I think, a partner, someone you might want to look at is so-and-so. If it just seems like the kind of thing that your church is needing is not something that we specialize in. We're all on Team Jesus. All of us who work in this space, we may be different organizations, but we all are serving the same Big C church. And so we're hoping that these 10 points, truly, we've approached them from our perspective because we have to, but we hope that these 10 points, number 1, a balanced approach. Number 2, denominationally flexible. Number 3, good assessment. Number 4, biblical foundation. Number 5, clear process. Number 6, coaching. 7, experienced. Number 8, cost. Number 9, empowered leadership. And number 10, listening. That these 10 factors can be good criteria for you to evaluate any partner. And we just hope that we believe in the idea of church consulting just generally. It's why doctors go to a doctor. They don't diagnose themselves. It is not a reflection of your ability to lead or your experience to ask someone to help you. We all need one another. We have people who help us. We've worked with people outside of our organization to help our organization get better on things. So don't be afraid to ask for help and to find a partner. And we'd love for it to be us, but we'd love for it to be someone else also. And that's either would be better than going it alone, especially if your church is struggling. So
yeah, for sure. This is the time of year. I mean, it's 2021. 2020 was tough for everybody. We know it. And I don't know how it worked out for your church, but now is the time. Now is the time to make some positive changes and become a disciple-making church that is living out the potential that God sees in you and put you there for.
That's right.
All right.
Hey, we have a winner to announce, AJ.
We do. It's exciting. So, yes, we're happy to announce Eric Thompson from Hope Church is being awarded our free church ministry analysis. Eric Thompson.
Congratulations.
That could be a common name, and Hope Church could be a common church name.
Right.
If you think you won, but you didn't enter, it's not you. Okay. So
we contacted Eric directly.
There was only one Eric Thompson that entered, and we're in touch with Eric. And so thanks to everybody that did put their name in the hat for the CMA.
We got a consolation prize for everyone who entered that didn't win. So if you entered, you should be getting an email from us. If you haven't already gotten it, you'll be getting one from us.
Check your spam folder.
Check your spam. Yeah. We'll be sure to be in touch directly with you to give you like I said, little consolation prize.
There you go. Well, today's topic is available on our website at malfersgroup.com/71. And we're glad that you are with us today on the Church Revitalization Podcast. We'll be back with you again next week with some fresh content to help your church thrive. Thanks.